Please welcome to the stage Joseph Mays, Bia Labash, and their friend Sarah Fernandez is going to be moderating this panel for you guys. So enjoy.
Hello, Miami.
Hello, hello. All right,
Hello.
how are we doing? Yeah. We're doing it. We're here, we're together, we're in the room. Welcome, welcome. And I'm very, very, very honored and excited to introduce two of my friends. So from the Chacruna Institute, this is Dr. Bia Labate and Joseph Mays. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Buenos dias, Miami. Olá. Gusto estar aqui. Prazer. Greetings and salutations in Portuguese and Spanish from me. It's nice to be here. My name is Bia Labate. I'm executive director of the Chacruna Institute, and I also have a PhD in anthropology. And thank you, organizers, sending solidarity for the challenges you experienced this morning, and wishing everybody a really wonderful journey that brings a lot of knowledge, healing, and community.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. As Sarah said, I'm Joseph, and I am an ethnobotanist, and I also direct the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative program for the Chacruna Institute, which is our grassroots network of different indigenous community organizations representing over 30 indigenous groups in 7 countries. And we support their different conservation projects fighting for food, for water, for land, for cultural sovereignty, which is, my own hope that offering can help support the biodiversity and the cultural knowledge that we all depend on. And it's really nice to be here. I was actually born in Jacksonville, Florida, so a little bit of Florida.
Florida native, all right, there we go. Thank you so much for that. And I'm Sarah Fernandez, and I originally got into the space through decriminalization work, but I am just here to support and encourage, and would one of you love to give us an intro into Chacruna?
Okay, so maybe you are all wondering what this Chacruna means. It's a word in Quechua, and it's one of the components that make ayahuasca. It's a word, one of the elements that are part of the brew. And so ayahuasca is our main teacher and friend, and our nonprofit is dedicated to plant medicines. So we have different programs. We're basically doing public education, which is something that everybody says it's important to do, and we have to educate people. However, there's almost nobody doing this, in fact. And there's also almost no funding for this, in fact. And, it's a kind of cliche, but in practical terms, it's really important. It's part of the foundations of this ecosystem, and also a way to keep this movement honest and with integrity. So Chacruna is talking about the origins of the psychedelic movement. We have a big emphasis on indigenous people, shamanism, plant medicine, ceremony, ritual, Global South. We have this program that Joe is going to talk more about, which is the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas. And then we have another program that we call Psychedelic Justice. So basically it's introducing discussions around gender and race, social justice into the field of psychedelics. And we have 2 different branches, 2 different committees working on basically elevating voices of indigenous people, Black people, people of color, queer people, women, people from the Global South, people like myself, immigrants, people with an accent. That's the program Psychedelic Justice. And the other program we have is called Protection of Sacred Plants and Cultural Traditions. And so we have been doing a lot of organizing with psychedelic churches and trying to help folks to self-organize and create best practices around their ceremonial work. We have launched a guide about it. We can talk more about the specific actions of this program. And we promote a lot of articles and discussions around conservation of plant medicines and keeping leaders accountable. So basically we're doing education with a few different branches: minorities, plant medicine, indigenous stuff, people that have less visibility. So the psychedelic field has been telling itself a kind of narrative about who we are, where we came from, and that narrative is kind of centered on a sort of view that is very focused on science, on biomedicine, on the global north, on white male perspectives, and all of that is really important. But there's also other voices and other points of view that receive less attention and that have been less platformed. And there's different ways to tell the stories from other angles. So like when you see a picture, you can see it from one angle or another angle, and we're trying to look for these other angles to see how it looks from their point of view. And so we're helping rewrite the storytelling, the cultural narratives that we tell ourselves about who we are. And again, there's much to talk. I hope we go
And we'll
more.
definitely get into it. Absolutely. No, the Chacruna Institute does very important work highlighting and identifying the most vulnerable and who need their voices uplifted. And that is what Joseph has started in April of 2021 with his new initiative.
Yeah, so we mentioned, I know there's a lot of new acronyms and words being introduced, but IRI is what we call the IRI, or the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, and I think it's part of what I feel like is a really important piece of what Chacruna does. So as Via mentioned, Chacruna, the name comes from the leaf, which is most typically one of the 2 ingredients in ayahuasca preparations, and it comes from the Quechua language, and it actually comes from the verb chacroy, which means to mix. And one of the things that you find in indigenous languages is that the words often carry a lot of meaning about ecological relationships, and so when you lose a language, you also lose that ecological knowledge. And yeah, just one more note about Miami, where we all are. You know, the Miami city is named for the Miami River, which comes from the Miami people, the Miami, the Calusa, and the Tequesta people. In their language, that word meant big water, which teaches us something about where we are, which is a wetland, a plain that goes between, Biscayne Bay and the Everglades, and it's an important organ of the planet. And I think that Chacruna, as an organization, helps us to stay connected with our roots and understand what our relationship is with the people and the populations and the environments that we all depend on. No matter what you're working with, if you're working with synthetic psychedelics or second-generation psychedelics, you still have a continuity with indigenous people and plant medicines. And so with the IRI program, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative, we wanted to create an offering that would be one way to integrate and give back to the people who need our support, and as well as the environments that support indigenous knowledge and to support plant knowledge, and that support everything that we do by stewarding the biodiversity that we depend on. So no matter what you're doing in your life, you depend on biodiversity to live. And reciprocity is in the name because, the idea of reciprocity is that we are all here because of the gifts of other beings. And so with our gratitude and that gift, that's how we create our lives. And so no matter what you're doing in the psychedelic space, a lot of people feel a desire or an obligation to give back, because when you're in relationships have responsibilities and obligations. That's what it means to be part of a community. And so if we all want to call this a psychedelic community, you have to ask yourself, what is your role in that community? How are you participating as a member of your community? And that means that you're serving and you're giving. And so there's not an obvious answer to how to give back when you aren't really sure. Maybe you're not directly connected with a certain community or an environment, but the IRI program, we have relationships with different indigenous community organizations in the United States, the Dene Nation, the Nez Perce, the Lakota, as well as in Mexico with the Huirarica and the Mazatec, and then in Costa Rica, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. We are partnering with organizations that are engaged in struggles for survival, and they need help with their basic, stability, with their ability to have clean water, to have control over the resources in their territories. And we also know that that's actually the most effective way to support biodiversity, is to support local and indigenous people. And so trying to pull all of that together into one program, which the psychedelic community can support in different ways, and also learn and connect with the roots of the medicines and the cultures that they're engaging with, so that you're not alienated, so that you're participating as an informed and conscious community member, rather than just a consumer who is treating psychedelics like any other commodity.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I mean, the work that you guys are doing with this initiative is transformative. I mean, what you're doing is bringing sovereignty and making that the North Star of helping people. And that's what I think a lot of these substances do for me. And that's kind of what I see, is they bring our sovereignty. They bring us back to ourselves. And through that sovereignty, we want to find connection. And so it's incredibly, it's hard when we come from this patriarchal point of view, where we're like, we want to give back, so let me, give money or do the things for them. But that's not helpful. If you teach a man to fish, that's true power. And that's what you guys are doing with your initiatives. And it's really incredible and transformative. And so that leads me to my next question, which is, what does it look like to build a bridge between the world of plant medicine and the emergent field of psychedelic science, between traditional ceremonial use and clinical and therapeutic settings? And what is the importance of doing this?
Yeah, again, like Joe said, there's not like a straightforward answer. What we're offering here is not something like comes in a pill. We also invite everybody to co-join this movement in asking this question. I just want to complement what he said, to say that I think by now we have raised about 150,000 for our indigenous reciprocity initiative, and currently we have 17 groups. So we have given small grants to help them create initiatives that we're not telling them what to do, but rather supporting what they have already going on, and on their own terms, and they don't have to present sexy decks or convince us that their work matter. The work in finding who they are and thinking whether they're legitimate or not is on us, and based on relationships. And we're trying to avoid that trick of philanthropy that people are disputing money between themselves and trying to convince philanthropists that what they do matter. That's our modest contribution to what we call decolonizing philanthropy. In terms of this question, again, I think it's a lot about, first of all, acknowledging indigenous people and their importance. I kind of don't like very much this word industry. That's just me. I see ourselves as part of a movement, and again, in this movement, we're not here, we didn't just fall out of the sky in a parachute in this, well, maybe that doesn't translate. It's an expression in Portuguese to say, the reasons why we are in this movement have a lot to do with indigenous people. Of course, there are non-indigenous origins and sources of the psychedelic movement, but indigenous people have provided a lot, it's either the substances themselves, or by analyzing their substances and their uses, that we created our own substances, and also by analyzing their practices, that we developed a lot of our own practices. So there is the kind of untold story, this continuity between shamanism, the world of ceremony, and then the underground, where people were using some of these substances, and then the above ground therapy. A lot of the notions that we use today come from ceremony, and there's a lot of gaps to be told on the way this story is narrated. Of course, we have our own heroes and our own different origins, and also things appear simultaneously in different contexts. But there is definitely underrepresentation of indigenous voices, and there's a fetishization of indigenous people, a romanticization, and they're not brought to speak. We don't talk to them, we don't hear them, we don't center them, and we use them for our own utilitarian means, which is, I need my healing, and you can offer that to me, and so I'm going to respect you because I need that from you. But they have their own struggles, they have their own political issues, they have a lot of problems and a lot of priorities. So we're all about centering these voices. I just published an article on nature mental health with an indigenous collaborator and a neuroscientist from Brazil. It was called Psychedelic Science and Indigenous Shamanism, an Urgent Dialogue. So are we asking indigenous people thoughts? Are we bringing them into the conversation? Are we centering their views? And what are we doing to support them on their own terms? How much of what we create is geared towards giving back? And there is a huge inequality between North and South, and between segments of our own society here in the United States. Huge amounts of inequality. And so somebody asked me yesterday, what are you doing here, Bia? It doesn't look a lot like you're seeing. I said, no, we need to create these bridges, and we need to, I'm here to educate. I'm here to praise, to preach my views to everybody that want to listen. Thanks you all for listening. You know, I think it's all about us creating these dialogues and creating these conversations. That's why we call creating critical conversations. And that's what we're trying to spread here, a basic message.
Yeah, you've always been a person who has been building bridges and stepping into unsafe spaces to spread that message. And I mean, even last night in the car, you were telling me, you're like, every day is a new day. I just get more interesting. And we need minds like yours. We need inquisitive, curious minds to keep pushing, keep questioning. But I'd love to turn the mic over to Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And Bia, I think, you know, to go back to your question about what it looks like, I think part of that is recognition. It starts with the recognition of like what our role is and of where we come from. So like Bia mentioned, like psychedelic science itself, the word psychedelic, you know, was coined by Abram Hoffer and Aldous Huxley based on their experiences in Native American church ceremonies. So that's, even psychedelic science as a phrase wouldn't exist without indigenous people in a very direct way. So there's really no way to escape our relationship with indigenous people, with indigenous practices, and just with the biosphere that gives us life. And so I just think sometimes it's hard to think about how we act on that. After we recognize, you know, our position, and then we also recognize the inequalities that exist, the next step is like, how do we act on that, and what does it look like? And so with our work with IRI, it's really, as Bia said, really important to stress that it's on the terms of our partners that we're working. So in conventional philanthropy and in a lot of development projects, they're imposed on a local group, on a people who have been marginalized. The projects are sort of given to a community on certain terms with certain conditions. And so what we do with our fund is we have built relationships over time, which you know, building trust takes time. You have to move slowly, and that's kind of like antithetical to what a lot of the energy in this movement is about. In any burgeoning industry, is to go as fast as possible, but it's really a challenge that we can all give ourselves to slow down, and I think understand that trust takes time, especially with people who have been burned so many times and who have been mistreated and misled by supposedly well-meaning philanthropists or developers. And so especially with indigenous people, what we've done is our community partners all have their own community organizations. Right now we have 17 active grantees, and they represent over 30 different indigenous groups. And they're all, they have formed their own organizations. They're working on their own priorities as they've identified them, whether that's, access to water or fighting for land rights, fighting for cultural sovereignty to preserve languages or to reforest with native plants, to have food security, to have stability as a community. Because, I can't really control the industry. I know Bia doesn't like the word, but we have to, understand that we're part of an industry which is growing, and the forces of that industry are going to continue on despite whatever I might think about it. And so how can I empower the people at the grassroots level? How can I work towards establishing a process where the people who are going to be approached for their resources, for their cultural knowledge, for their labor, for their natural resources, how can they be in the most empowered position possible in order to dictate terms with outsiders, with people who want to build a retreat center or source medicine, or have them participate in a panel or a conference? The more powerful they are as a community, the more autonomy they have, then they can dictate whatever terms they want to the outside actors who they have to engage with in order to survive. There's no choice but to be part of this market. And so how can we challenge the tendencies, the structural and systemic tendencies of this market, which is to marginalize and to accumulate in one direction the wealth. And so we focus on doing things on the terms of our own partners to just support their work in the way that they want us to do. And so rather than imposing a project from the outside, we're just trying to empower the grassroots, because as we all know, all of this is built on a foundation. And so we want to work from the foundation upwards rather than from the top down. In nature, we don't see any hierarchical systems. There are no top-down or linear processes in nature. That's always distributed, and it's always supported by the roots, by the soil. So that's what we try to mirror in how we build our organization.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, that this model, I was just at Concordia, and I heard Jose Andres talk about his foundation, and he was mirroring exactly what you guys were saying, and he was challenging everybody in the crowd. He was like, if you're not empowering the grassroots, then you're not doing anything. And this is a man who's, running a $1 billion foundation, really changing the world and feeding the world from the grassroots. So I personally want to say thank you to both of you, because you have really shifted my perspective and my mind and how I operate in business. It shifted what clients we take on and who we work with, and because we have that power and because you guys have really opened that up and made me realize. And any company, we luckily have just found a company where they're working with the indigenous community, and they've put one of the indigenous people on their cap table, and they're in their C-suite, and that's a company that I want to work with that has actual indigenous people on the board making decisions. And so thank you for the work that you're doing, because I see it is happening very slowly, but we are starting to see businesses make those changes and realize that they need to have the indigenous representation if they're going to be working in a specific area in indigenous land. Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah.
No.
Thanks for bringing us up here.
Oh my God, no, anytime I can hype up Chacruna, because they do amazing and ingenious stuff. So, Bia, I'd love to ask you, what cutting edge conversations and dialogues, actually both of you, what cutting edge conversations and dialogues has Chacruna been shedding light on as of recently? And what are some thoughts that have continuously come up throughout the existence of Chacruna? All right, we'll start with the first one. What cutting edge conversations and dialogues has Chacruna been shedding light on recently?
Yeah, I want to just take a minute to mention our queer stuff. I have been a person that suffered a lot of oppression, and as a Brazilian, growing up in a patriarchal, very Catholic, controlling society, I was, as they say here in the United States, in the closet, dating my partner, Clancy, who's my wife now, for 7 years. So secretly. So I always just like to make a point that I'm not on that closet anymore, and I like to thank you, Clancy, for your patience.
Yes, Clancy is the real one.
Yeah, so we're together for 13 years. We met in a psychedelic science conference, and we're kind of conference nerd couple. We like to go to conferences a lot, and we produce conferences too. So I told her, when I moved to California, I like to make this joke. Maybe it's more funny to me that psychedelics didn't heal me, but California healed me. Because I took a lot of psychedelics in oppressive contexts that, didn't help. But when I came to California, I got really kicked out of that closet because people over there don't like when you're like, disguising things or whatever. So it was a whole process for me. And then I told Clancy, all right, I'm ready to get out. Let's make a conference to celebrate that because we're a conference couple and we like conferences. And so we met in a conference. And so I say, that's how we created Queering Psychedelics 2019. And it was a huge party, frankly, and it was just fabulous, with that gay love, that gay joy, that I don't want to, nothing against straight people, but, gay parties are really, kind of better in a way. So there's a lot of resilience in this community, a lot of stigma, a lot of trauma, a lot of shame, a lot of internalized homophobia. That needs all this bonding. So it was like you put a little cheese, and all these little rats coming out, from all those secret spots all over the country. Like it was fabulous, because we found this crowd that was completely like into psychedelics and into LGBT things. And it's a very obvious crossover, isn't it? Like the LGBT movement and the queer movement and the psychedelic movement, but it was not really, that bridge was not there. So it was like catalyzing something that was underneath, and bringing it to the surface, and then just helping it, boom, splash out there. Like right after this conference, we saw like dozens of queer circles emerge, all around the country. So we didn't invent queer people. We didn't invent queer people that like psychedelics. We didn't invent queer people that take psychedelics for healing, for their shame, for their internalized homophobia, for being kicked out of home. But we help that those voices come together and elevate themselves and feel pride and joy. And then we created a new book, Queer and Psychedelics, From Oppression to Liberation, because we also see that there was a history in the movement of psychedelics to heal gay people by giving them psychedelics, doing all kinds of bad stuff, all kinds of experiments, violent experiments that are abusive science, and we haven't reckoned with those skeletons in the closet, as my co-editor and friend Alex Belzer always calls it. So there is also a need to acknowledge this oppression. Same thing with black folks that were experimented on with psychedelics in prisons without consent. So there's a whole history of utilizing minorities for certain hegemonic projects that is not reckoned upon. And so I like to mention the queer stuff as something that is really important to us. We just did a second edition in this year, 2023. This edition followed the book, and it was a whole other setup. We had like 3 simultaneous tracks and all kinds of sub-discussions. Kink and psychedelics, consent and psychedelics, poly and psychedelics, disabled folks, psychedelics and pleasure, erotic pleasure and psychedelics, all kinds, science, the need to reveal the dyad, male, female scientists, like Native American voices and LGBTQ, two-spirit things. So it really grew. And we also did a similar work relating to race, but perhaps I'll stop here.
No, her work that she could go on, which she could fill this entire. She has filled entire conferences with all the work and the breadth of work that she has done. And So I love this question. I love because Chacruna is always cutting edge. What is the importance of Gen Z perspectives at Chacruna, and what conversations have emerged from this new generation of psychedelic researchers?
We're both too old to answer that question, I think. But I want Chacruna. I mean, I guess I'm really grateful to work with people from many different generations at Chacruna, as well as from different communities. And so one of the things I love about Chacruna is, you know, it's a place where we're trying to bring voices from every generation, and also like I get to speak Portuguese and Spanish half the time. I'm working with our team members in Mexico and Brazil. I'm not just sort of in an echo chamber isolated in like one American-centric perspective. But yeah, we have some great team members who are from the Gen Z, and we also have team members who are talking about psychedelic parenthood. You know, my great friend and our colleague who directs Chacruna Latinoamerica, Glauber Lores de Assis. He's been speaking a lot about psychedelic parenthood, about the importance of integrating children and youth into the conversation, because in his culture in Brazil, it's common for children to be participating in ceremony. And actually, when you make a conference, you have to think about these things, because you know, there are restrictions often on younger generations and how far they can come into the space, what they can say, or how they can participate. And also, you know, children aren't usually seen at a conference like this, but when you exclude children, you're also excluding caregivers, mothers, people who are typically the ones taking care of the children. If the children can't come, then they can also, you know, they also won't be able to come. And so it's important to think about, you know, how we can really bring together not just the global south, but also other generations. And yeah, I think that Chacruna is taking some important steps to do that.
Yeah, I want to say that a lot of what started this thing was that, you know, we do very social justice stuff, very progressive stuff. So like when we did Queer in Psychedelics, we got a lot of hate, you know, oh, those gay people think they're all special and they're all different and they're superior, and you're like Marxist, chauvinist, you know, haters. And then we thought, you know, maybe straight people are feeling alienated. Let's make some, you know, posts. Not gay, not a problem. There's a space for you in Queer Psychedelics. Come as an ally. And we got a whole other wave of hate, like, this straight people hijacking our queer movement, and, you know, this is pink washing, and this is, you know, you're all just commercial people appropriating this, and why are you doing this work? And then I just feel like, I don't know, like it's too much. And also I'm an immigrant, I don't understand. So the solution is like, let's ask young people, because they are, you know, they're getting out of the womb, going into an iPad, and they're all like queer and non-binary, and then they're also tired of the bullshit. I have a lot of hope. I have my criticisms too, but you know, I see young people, they're ahead of the curve. So we try to like have a few younger folks that would play the role of like shadow kind of, you know, board member that would run things over through them. Like we want to do this campaign. You have the pulse of the spirit of times more than we do. What do you think? And then like this, we sort of got more young people involved. And, you know, there's also just areas that it's entirely like it's their realm, like social media. And then there's a whole discussion between format and form, right? Like, one thing is the content, the other is the form, the medium. No, it's all together. Everything is together, because the way you express your message is part of the way the world receives it. And so you need to have more contemporary language. And so it's not the time that you're educated by, you know, a paper. You're educated by videos. Each platform has a different language. And so the whole mission of Chacruna is to make academic knowledge more accessible and keep the rigor, but speak to community. And in that sense, the language is really important. So if you want to teach people about ceremony, maybe you have to do a funny video with the ceremony going wrong. And, there needs to be a level of compromise in that those old structures of knowledge to be more appealing and to talk to different generations. And we're also just trying to empower a generation of speakers. We have a program, a training program inside Chacruna that we give people a chance to speak, and we monitor. They do internal team presentations, and then, we record videos, and then we watch, and then we give them feedback, and then we're creating this collaborative way to create a whole other generation of speakers. And we're also I want to tell for business people in this conference, if you're trying to create a business and you're trying to do something in the space of psychedelics, are you incorporating values of the psychedelic ethos experience into your business model? And how do you do that? And that is just so hard because it's much easier to be mainstream. It's cheaper. It costs less money. Incorporating social justice into your business is very expensive. It's like buying organic products. It costs more because it takes more. You have to have care for mental health. In Chacruna, if anybody wants to do retreats, that is not on their vacation. That's part of their job. So we have sent different team members to take psychedelics, all paid by us. Language and ceremony, all, we have a program to teach people to speak Spanish and Portuguese. We do tandems inside the groups. We let people go to ceremonies. We send them to ceremonies. And we consider any project of learning and knowledge as professional development aligned with the organization. And so we're trying to create an organization that is also horizontal, that has, a board and a team that participates in the direction of the organization, that has diversity inside the organization, that is not just American and not just American-based, and not just English. So I want to invite everybody to think about how are you creating your businesses in ways that reflect models that are values that you incorporate.
Absolutely, yes. And that's if you can go to the mountaintop, but if you can't figure out how to bring that message down and integrate it into the valley, into our everyday, unfortunately, we are still monkeys. We're still meat bags. I know a lot of people like to forget, but we are still human, and we're still here working in this plane, and it's important to incorporate and really imbibe those principles. We were just talking about it, but what we are seeing, and hopefully with these messages are influencing into the business realm, because we are seeing people showing how imbibing more joy and really taking care of your employees brings you a higher ROI. You will see that financially. You will see that in your investment in the company. And so because you guys are a nonprofit, what are the main challenges for a grassroots nonprofit like Chacruna, and how have you guys been able to overcome these things, and how can we support you?
Well, you can come to our panel workshop tomorrow at 3 p.m. on the main stage. We'll be sharing, along with our co-founder Clancy, a little bit more about our work to protect sacred plants, to build allyship with indigenous communities, and you can hear a lot more about what the challenges and obstacles to those are. I mean, I think for Chacruna, we face a lot of the same challenges and obstacles that other organizations face. Just like it's always reassuring in some ways to come to conferences, and people are very nice and complimentary about Chacruna and the work Chacruna does. And I think that speaks to just the power of BIA, of the organization and the message that it spreads. But I think there's often a disconnect between that and then the actual support that the organization receives and our sustainability. So we just want to be able to continue doing the work that we're doing. And I think everybody is struggling with that, with sustainability and burnout. And when you're giving to something that's important to you, you're passionate about it, even if it's a for-profit business, there's always a balance to try and make sure that everybody's taken care of that's doing the work, and also giving as much as they can, but also having a decent standard of living. And I think for me, it's just like learning. There's a learning curve for me because I come from, I'm an anthropologist and an ethnobotanist. I don't know anything about fundraising or building a program or managing big budgets or closing deals. I don't know anything about that. So I really am trying to learn more about just like relying on the other people in the space that are there, that are willing to help. And I think just figuring that out is something that I've been challenged with in recent years. And yeah, I think that a lot of people are just like breaking into this space with big ideas and big ambitions without necessarily all of the technical knowledge to get from point A to B. And so I think, like Sarah mentioned, like if you have the message, it's meaningless unless you're able to communicate it and integrate it. And I think the other big challenge for Chacruna, and I think for all of us, is asking ourselves, whatever your position is and whatever work you're engaged in, what does it look like for you to be embodying and integrating the principles of the psychedelic ethos of connection, of understanding and recognizing our interconnection? How does that impact the way that you build your business and your organization? Do you have like a more democratic structure or a more distributed way of decision making in your organization? Do you have a different way of building things, which may seem expensive to integrate those things, but actually in the long run, I think the yield will always be better and more sustainable. And that's also how we structure the ERIE program, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative. All of the funding is controlled by the indigenous community organizations. The way that resources are allocated, the projects, they're all designed, managed, and controlled by the communities rather than by our program or by our organization. And that's part of trying to integrate at every level the messages and ideas that we want to communicate.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think this field is expanding. I have basically my whole career around psychedelics since about 1990, when I took mushrooms in Mexico while backpacking when I was in my early 20s. I have dedicated all my studies, undergrad, bachelor, master, PhD, everything to psychedelics. And then I just kind of had a job in psychedelics ever, except once that I had a little gig of 6 months elsewhere. But I've been basically doing this for all my life. And the field has entirely exploded, and it's a completely different scenario. And many of us are kind of shocked and lost with the way that things are going, and it seems incredibly commercial, incredibly superficial, and incredibly banalizing and vulgarizing at times. And I think the main challenge is to find a space of nonprofits in this so-called new ecosystem of the space of the critical thinking, and the space of education, because there's a lot of interest, let's say, in startups, and there's a lot of interest in the new regulation models in Colorado and Oregon. There's a lot of interest in the biomedical stream and MDMA and psilocybin as therapies for PTSD, depression. But there's a whole other set of things that there's not a lot of support to. People that are just talking about education, about the integrity and the ethics that are needed to happen, criticizing commodification of psychedelics, talking about the importance to center indigenous voices, black folks, people from outside the United States, to create education, to create critical thinking, to create a whole other generation of leaders, to remember our elders, to honor the people that brought us here, that were doing ceremonies and therapies in the underground, taking a lot of risks that help advanced the counterculture movement. Everything that has happened for us to be here today, there's a whole set of people, there's a lot of pioneers of founders that are dying in poverty without any kind of support. You know, a lot of the older women that helped advance, you know, make LSD in the underground and dated some of these heroes and pioneers of the psychedelic movement are now old and don't have support. And so there's a lot of things that need to be done. Then there is not like a system that provides funding for that. And so also a lot of people are doing underground work, grassroots work, entirely self-funded, and that's just not sustainable. So there needs to be an understanding from people with more wealth that part of this movement needs to be put into things that are not profitable or commercial, that are just things that have a meaning, and a purpose, and an education. And, you know, that's just really hard. So I encourage people to donate and also to participate and to get informed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the investment. That's the investment that you're taking into yourselves. Like, we all came from somewhere. We all have people. We all have your ancestors. You can call them in and start rooting down into that, and starting to root into who you are and into your spirituality and into your ancestors will also open up other pathways that you might be looking for with substances. Oftentimes, you know, we're looking for these things that we don't through substances, and what we're looking for is our groundedness, our rootedness, and who we come from and where we come from. And so thank you for protecting that and making sure that those voices are heard, that those voices are empowered, and that those voices are starting to find sovereignty. And please donate to Chacruna. It's a 501(c)(3), it's a tax write-off. They have a table here. You can go buy Bia's books. You can go buy a lot of some Hape materials, and I would love to open up the floor at this point for any questions, if we have any questions. And it's okay. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of ways to collaborate. We have we have community partners are more like people like us that are nonprofits and stuff. And then we have sponsorships for our conferences. We have people that have supported the indigenous reciprocity initiative. We can talk more. I want to say also, I just want to stress one piece for the business owners. I'm editing a journal that's called Power and Hierarchy or something in Institutions and Organizations. And just a basic thing, all organizations are like creating a diversity group because it's kind of important these days. And so, okay, yay for that. But the leadership doesn't diversify itself. It's like the leadership hires and puts a little piece there. This is the diversity crew. But they're not like diversifying themselves. So there's an irony there. Like if you really want to create something different and more revolutionary and radical, then you share your power and you put a person of color and you put a minority voice as a director with the same voice and funding that you have for yourself, which is different. Like, let them play there somewhere, because doing diversity without empowering them and without funding them, it ends up being just tokenizing and virtual signaling. And so that's just something I forgot to say.
A diverse ecosystem is a strong ecosystem. That's something that we know from nature, and that is something I really want to stress to everybody, that a diverse ecosystem is strong. That is beautiful.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, everybody has their own limitations, especially when you have a small business or a startup. And I think another thing about Chacruna is it's not just about, as Bia mentioned, tokenizing or virtual signaling, but being pragmatic and practical. And so we're interested in working with people and meeting them where they're at, and also finding different ways. You know, like Bia mentioned, we have community partners, we also have sponsors, but we also do all kinds of different collaborations with institutions and businesses, and whether that's like bringing you into a conversation for public forums, for talks around different subjects, for doing some sort of like collaboration or synergy. There are a lot of different ways to get affiliated with us, so please
we do
don't
a
be
lot
shy.
of swaps. Like basically we get all we can from anybody we can. Like if a person has a retreat, we'll take, a swap. Can we send a team member? If he has a good designer, can the designer volunteer 2 hours? If he is, really good in marketing, do you want to come and give us a lecture? We're about this economy of solidarity. We're about dialogue. We're about bridging. We're about collaborating. So there's space for everybody that wants to participate.
No, and I think that's a great question. Definitely go up and start asking them and start talking and start seeing where synergies and what starts sparking. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you.
I want to echo and ditto that. It is this past year in the space, what are we calling it? Not industry.
I like to call it as a movement.
Movement. I like that better.
Hippie,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's been. I think we've seen a lot of changes. It's been hard on a lot of people, and it's been hard on all of us. And for them to keep walking in their mission, to keep pushing through every day, to fundraise, to make sure that the voices that are not being heard in these spaces are being heard and represented, that these medicines, they're indigenous and they're ancestral, the stewards are being, supported. And, we know from science that the indigenous people are the stewards of our biodiversity. And like I said, again, a biodiverse ecosystem is a strong ecosystem. So thank you for being here. Oh yes, and we're gonna have our final remarks.
Again, thank you for bearing with me, all of you, for my long preaching stuff. Every time I talk to these investors, I almost always end up saying, "Do you need a 20?" Because people are like always talking about their financial challenges and how hard it is, and they're raising millions of dollars. And they're always complaining about how bad it is and how the situation is so chaotic. I understand that running ambitious projects involve more money, and I understand that it takes a lot of time to raise money, and I understand that it takes a lot of time to make your business sustainable. But I also want to invite people to think, is that really all I can do? Is that the best I can do? Is there no room for more generosity in this heart and in this house? And as I'm building this and I'm creating the structures that will allow me to bring, and give back, I want to remind people, half of our team is in Mexico and Brazil. There is so much unemployment and poverty and violence and corruption in these areas of the world. And it's just heartbreaking, like people living on salaries that are completely, it's like a night in the Hilton, hotel. And so I think people have to really, ask themselves what kind of business do they want to be? And how do they want to show up? And are they trying to create a business that is truly inspiring, or is just the whole discourse on we need to scale and we need to heal and we need to save humanity? There's a lot of, wishful thinking in that. I think start by doing smaller actions to your community, serving a little bit people around your neighborhood, asking people that are close to you, how can you help? A really good tip is like ask people, what do you need? How can I help you? And so for me, it's been a journey. The first time I was invited to come to Miami Wonderland, I said, absolutely not. I'm not in alignment. Next year, I decided to come, and it's been a work in progress. I'm here again. I really want to thank the organizers, for inviting me. We all have to try to find a way to learn together and to help each other and to support the larger movement, because it takes all of us with all our roles. So I really appreciate, people being here and being open. I want to also invite you to come to the rest of our presentations with Clancy's and a panel on artists. And Hannah is going to be talking about her perspective as a young Muslim woman. We also had that whole work around religion and psychedelics and legal issues and plant medicines that I didn't speak a lot about today. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph, would you like to finish?
No.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody. And yes, I'll leave you with this. Just think about how you want to live your life the next time you have to go up against that mirror, right? So that's how I think about it. So thank you so much. Enjoy Wonderland.
Thank
you.
Chacruna. Hey, Chacruna Institute, everybody. Yeah, all right.